Good news, everybody. Criminal justice reform is back. This time with the most unlikely of allies, the most unlikely of leaders, the most unlikely of people pushing to make criminal justice reform, air quotes, a reality. And that's Jared Kushner. I don't know how he quite figured this out, but one morning Jared Kushner, maybe he was watching the Republican primaries in 2016, where 14 of the 17 Republican primary candidates were down with criminal justice reform, i.e., too many black people are in prison for no reason whatsoever, so why can't we just let them out? That's a reality now. That's a reality all over the country. We're going to see two examples of it. But Jared Kushner wants to take it to a new level because he knows that the only reason there's too many black people in prison is because they don't have jobs, they don't have the training, and they're not, and so they're going to spend a whole bunch of money to reduce recidivism among nonviolent offenders. Then they're going to give people more and more credit for good behavior in prison, so everybody gets out of prison early. Here's the thing with a prison sentence. How many of these prison cases actually go to court? I don't know, 5%, 10%? Let's make a deal in there. So you walk in with 20 charges from, holding on to some small amount of pot or methamphetamine or crack cocaine, and all the way up to, you bonked a little old lady over the head, and she hasn't been out of the hospital since. So it's not uncommon for somebody to walk in there with 10 or 20 charges like that. But it's all about let's make a deal. Everything gets reduced, everything gets dropped, except for a couple of drug charges. All of a sudden, you got the federal and the state prisons full up of people who, according to the papers, their only offense is drugs. Look at the numbers, Colin. Don't you know the numbers, Colin? Don't you read the books, Colin? Colin, you don't know what you're talking about, do you, Colin? All that other stuff that they were charged with, that they did, it all goes away. It never happened. And all we have left is a guy in prison, apparently, for holding on to an ounce of pot. Why do we want to keep them in prison? But when we know there was a whole raft of other charges connected to the pot, and it was like, okay, yeah, let's make a deal, good, boom, done, ounce of pot, do 2 years, you're gone, done. That's what a nonviolent offender is. They're not putting people in prison for smoking pot. I don't care what Van Jones and his idiot clowns say who talk about criminal justice reform. Oh, by the way, Van Jones and Jared Kushner, they're holding hands and making plans on this whole idea. Boy, just amazing how many. I still remember the videos we did during the primary of Marco. I can still hear Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, Rand Paul. Rand Paul, that was like his thing. He was going around to meetings of the NAACP, and he was going around to the ACLU explaining to people that as a libertarian, he knows better than most that there's way too many black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. What'd they do? Just blow a little pot? We're putting people in prison for that? He thought that was going to be the thing that ignited this rocket to the presidency. So everybody figured out what it was all about, and nobody was buying it. We shouldn't buy this either. Let me give you two reasons why, two recent stories. Check out these stories because this is the face of criminal justice reform.
Prosecutors say this chef attacked a woman after this judge let him out on bond for similar charges.
I made a mistake, and I'm not making a mistake again.
We're talking to an alleged victim about the judge's frank admission.
I don't want that situation to repeat itself.
Live, local, late breaking. This is Channel 2 Action News at 6 p.m. Coverage you can count on.
Good evening. I'm Justin Farmer.
I'm Jovita Moore. Channel 2 Action News was in the courtroom today when a chef accused of attacking a woman while he was out on bond faced a judge. And today the judge called his previous decision to let that man out a mistake. New at 6, Channel 2's investigative reporter Mark Winnie spoke to one of the man's alleged victims about that judge's admission. Mark?
Records appear to link 3 rape cases to 400 West Peachtree Street Northwest. If that's where Raymond Jones lived, I would not expect to see him back there immediately, not after a judge took ownership of a previous decision and denied bond this time.
I granted the bond?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, obviously, I made a mistake, and I'm not going to make a second mistake.
Why is a bond hearing so important to you?
Because if he's out, I would be really scared, like I was before.
I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was a veteran, because he was young, because he didn't have a record, and he picked up a third charge.
And then I know last time he got out, he allegedly raped someone else. I don't want that situation to repeat itself.
Back up to the beginning of the bond hearing.
This is a bond hearing for Raymond Jones, who's charged with 3 counts of rape.
Some may have seen him on video before on YouTube. Chef Ray is billed as a personal chef. Raymond Jones is charged with rape and more in 3 indictments. He's pled not guilty in each.
The first incident occurred on April 12th, 2016. We have another case that occurred on September 11th, 2016. The third case that we have occurred on April 25th, 2017, while the defendant was out on bond for the original 2 cases.
He stands here presumed innocent today, Judge.
Defense lawyer Will Arnold.
While serving his country, Judge, in the military, he fell from a plane and he actually suffered a traumatic brain injury. He was diagnosed as such. He was also diagnosed with chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome.
But for Judge Craig Schwall, one thing seemed to stand out.
I made a mistake, and I'm not making a mistake again. So bond is denied. We'll set it down for trial.
I think it took some guts for him to say, yeah, I made a mistake.
Yeah, I'm glad he did.
She said she was the second victim.
I know there may be other victims out there that didn't have a chance to speak up.
Fulton County ADA Gotham Rao indicated authorities suspect Jones drugged 2 of his 3 victims.
He went on a multi-city crime spree one day after being released from jail on bond. But it turns out he was also a murder suspect, and the victim's family says he should never have been on the streets. Tonight they're telling their story for the first time. Here's Fox 2's Amy Lane.
I said, he's out, he's out.
Larry Melton Sr. lost his son, his namesake, then watched as his suspected killer shot, kidnapped, and carjacked his way through Canton, Northville Township, Highland Park, and Detroit. A man named Alan Ferris, who he says should never have been on the street.
The system is really failing us by letting this guy get out, a guy like him get out, period.
Let's back up to March. Larry Melton Jr. is missing. His family checks his home on Bloom. They find his car a few blocks away on the east side, and his roommate, Alan Ferris, tries to run down Larry's son Isaiah and his friend, crashing into their car.
So when he swings around the corner, he comes and hit the car. Boom! Then he backs up, and my brother jumps out, and he rams at my brother with the car. My brother luckily jumps out just in the nick of time.
Ferris is locked up for assault with a dangerous weapon and malicious destruction of property. Then on March 26th, Larry Melton's body is found stuffed under the porch of a burned-out abandoned home on Detroit's east side.
He was beaten, severely beaten. Really, no human being should, or animal, or anyone should, the way they did. My son.
Ferris now a suspect in the murder of Larry Melton, but he's still locked up on that charge of felonious assault. Police and prosecutors assure the Melton family there's no way Ferris will be released on bond.
They say he wasn't supposed to get out because it was a repeat offense.
But records show on April 2nd, Ferris, a habitual offender, a convicted sex offender with a history of armed robbery and other offenses, is released after he pays $2,500, free to go on a crime spree that would threaten numerous lives.
Police say he carjacked people in Canton and Northville and was trying to steal a third car.
A woman shot outside a store in Canton, another carjacked and kidnapped in Northville Township, an attempted carjacking of an undercover officer, a shootout with police, and Ferris is dead. The Meltons will never see him go on trial for Larry's murder.
The biggest flaw I see is letting him go. The biggest flaw I see in the system is how did this guy get out?
Magistrate Laura Echartea did not return calls asking why Ferris's bond was set so low when he was an habitual offender charged with assault, and prosecutors asked for a high bond. As for Detroit police, they say it took time to develop their murder case against Ferris, and by the time they were able to notify prosecutors, he had bonded out. The same day he was supposed to appear in court for another hearing. Police are still waiting for crime lab results to come back to determine if someone else was involved, which could still take several weeks.
I want to know who was involved.
I want everybody that was involved with putting their hands on my brother to be detained in court.
In Detroit, Amy Lang, Fox 2 News.
What I found is that there's a lot of people in this government issue that was part of the campaign, and one of the reasons that I was excited about this president was I saw that he had the potential to be a president for all Americans, and because he didn't come from a traditional governing or government background, I saw the president as somebody who would take on all different issues that would impact all different people. This is an issue that I had personal experience with, so I spent some time thinking about, well, from the White House, what can be done? And so we started doing the way that we would look at problems in business. We said, okay, let's assess the problem, let's come up with a plan to try to drive solutions, and then let's come to a vigorous execution phase. What I found is that there's a lot of people in this government who are very, very passionate about this issue and really want to drive change, and I think we've started doing that, and I think we have a lot more effort that's going to be able to come. One of the things we have to do, though, is take it to the president. Obviously, this has to be the president's initiative, or else we wouldn't be able to be working on it here. And so we gathered a bunch of experts to meet with the president and explain to him, the situation with 650,000 people leaving prison every year, how a lot of these people will become future criminals with victims, and often how the people leaving prison are more disadvantaged than when they got into prison, and it makes them more likely to commit future offenses than it is for them to have opportunities and to live a second chance once they've paid their debt to society. The president's response was really remarkable. He looked at it. One of the people in the room said to the president, they said, well, you campaigned that you were going to work for the forgotten men and women of this country, and there's nobody more forgotten or underrepresented than the people in prison. And I could see right then the president said, that's right, we got to do something about this. And since then, he's been all in to push this initiative and has really empowered his team and led his team to try and drive solutions. So we've been working in the federal level. We're working on the state level with a lot of the great governors who are here today, and with a lot of you who are really, in the field doing great work. So that's how we got here. That's why we're doing it. And we believe we can make a lot of progress.
And I could not care less if somebody's playing 12-dimensional chess here in order to give a little bit of criminal justice reform here, attract some black vote here. All of a sudden, Trump's approval ratings from black people go from 10% to 22% to 30%. That will change the world. I acknowledge that. I don't care about that. I do care that it is an article of faith among lots of reporters and public officials and black people in this country is that there are too many black people in prison for no damn reason whatsoever. And so we're doing two things. One, this is huge. This is hugely popular, especially among the Soros DAs. One, we're going to no cash bail. Oh, by the way, no cash bail does not mean they're going to put you in the hoosgal until your trial. No cash bail means you get to leave without putting up anything that will help us guarantee that you're going to return to answer for these charges, often very, very violent ones. And the second thing on criminal justice reform is that there's too many black people in prison because there's too much white racism forcing people to commit these crimes, forcing white people to call 911 when somebody's being raped or murdered. Then all of a sudden, the person who was the criminal, all of a sudden they become the victim. Why should we send a victim to prison? He's a victim of white racism. Why should we send him to prison? Sounds stupid, doesn't it? I just gave you two examples of how this stupidity is now reality. Guy walks on a murder charge, goes out and kills people. Guy walks on a rape charge. Black guy walks on a rape charge, goes out and rapes a bunch more people. That's the level of insanity we're talking about when we talk about criminal justice reform. But if we're going to name this bill that Jared Kushner is pushing so mightily, so heavily, at least we could do a little bit of truth in advertising, right? Why don't we call it the 2018 Don't Make the Black Kids Angry Act?